Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 480 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, and I rarely ask you to agree with me. I'm asking you to hear me out. Let me first say Happy New Year. I hope that 2024 was everything that you could have possibly dreamed of. And I hope that 2025 brings more blessings to you and all your endeavors and your families. Anytime you have another day on this earth is another opportunity to be the best that you can be. And I hope that everyone's able to accept that and everyone's able to take that. And I hope that you have a great year. Where I'm going to start this episode off by is talking about the college football playoffs and what we're seeing. What we are seeing should have been easy to predict. Let me first, before we go on, let me talk about what happened in New Orleans and send my condolences to all the families that was affected by the terrorist attack that happened on New Year's Day, early in the morning on Bourbon Street. We don't need to get into the details, but everyone that lost their lives, I pray for the families, and I pray that it's always scary, you know. We're living in a world today where things are more unpredictable than they've ever been. And obviously you're never able to predict something as tragic as that happening, and you don't want to predict because you don't really want it to happen. Obviously, no one wants mass hysteria. No one wants mass death, and it's always sad, man. And I definitely pray for the families, and I hope. Obviously, I'm not going to lie to you, man. I'm sure that nobody wants to hear I'll pray for you because it's tough, especially in times like this. But that's all that, I and hopefully the world can do is pray. And obviously one of the biggest reasons why I'm talking about this is because it affected the college football playoffs and the Sugar Bowl. The Sugar Bowl, the first time in its existence where it had to be postponed to the next day because of the tragedy that we saw. So I, again, pray for the families, and I hope that everyone affected that is fortunately still alive is able to recover and able to, mentally, physically, emotionally repair themselves from what happened. So I wanted to get that out the way before the episode technically officially started. But to switch gears a little bit, one thing in sports that we talk about a lot is momentum. And how important it is, how dangerous it is to play against, how dangerous it is to play or to lose. Momentum is important in sports. Momentum, you can see it. Some things that are intangible, it's hard to see a lot of times. Like sometimes it is hard to see the value of something when it's not blatant, when it's not in your face. Sometimes it's hard to, you can't really see air. The only time you can see air is when it's cold and the air is coming from your breath. But even that, like you can't really see air, but we know how valuable it is. Momentum is like that in sports. And not as much when we talk about Texas and Arizona State, not as much when we talk about Penn State and Boise State, not even as much as when we talk about Notre Dame and Georgia. If you want to know exactly how momentum affects a team, how rust affects a team, look no further than the Ohio State-Oregon game. Now, I know you're probably going to hear me and you're thinking that I'm coming from a place of I'm probably hating because people know I'm an Oregon fan and I had Oregon winning the national championship. Obviously, that's not going to happen now. And while, yes, there are feelings that I have seeing my squad get bounced out their first game of the playoffs, this is one of the biggest reasons why I was adamant in my dislike of the format of the college football playoffs. All the credit in the world goes to Ohio State. Ohio State proved that when they are firing on all cylinders, and they proved this majority of the season, when they're firing on all cylinders, they are one of, if not the best team in college basketball or college football. With the players that they have, with the coaching staff, they have one of the most expensive, when we talk about NIL, they have one of the most expensive teams. When they're firing on all cylinders, it's almost unstoppable. And I talked ad nauseum about my gripes with Oregon being a number one seed and how they placed it. Now, to the college football playoffs credit, you can't predict Ohio State being a 7th or 8th seed or Tennessee being a 9th seed. You would hope that those teams that obviously was projected higher coming into the season, you would hope that they'd play themselves into a better seed. But in that game, one of the biggest fears, I'll say, as a fan, one of the biggest fears I had as a watcher is how it looks when you're playing against, or how a team that just played, that could or could not be rolling, goes up against a team that has been sitting for about 2.5 weeks. And we saw it. We saw a team at Ohio State that had, if you needed anything to be ironed out, if you needed that momentum ball to get rolling, they got it out the way against Tennessee. Because when it came to Oregon, they were firing on all cylinders. Outside of Oregon, they had to get their juices rolling in game. And as we saw, when you going against momentum, Ohio State scored the quickest 30 points I've seen in a while. And it's not like they were long drives. It was 3-play drives and a touchdown. It was 2-play drives and a touchdown. It just, Oregon could not get it going the first half. They chose the absolute worst time to have their worst half of the season. Now, this isn't just me talking about Oregon. This isn't just me having a gripe with Oregon and their road and not talk. We saw it almost everywhere. We saw it at the Texas Arizona State game to a certain extent. We saw it with the Boise State Penn State. We saw it with Notre Dame and Georgia. I don't know if Georgia would have went differently if Carson Beck played, but I do know that they looked rusty going in. Now, again, you could say it's because they had a first start quarterback in Stockton, but still, there's nothing that you can do. I'm not the layout. I have my gripes about how the number one seed was seeded and who they had to go against. Yeah. Me being an Oregon fan. Yeah. I don't think that there's too many teams, because I know a lot of people are saying, well, there's too many teams. No. And I'm not upset with it as far as how the layout is. What I just don't like is how every other sport, the number one seed at least gets the easiest path to the play. That's why in the NFL they reseed after round one. So whoever's the number one seed in the NFC and AFC, they're going to play the lower seed that wins, because they are rewarded for being the number one seed, as well as getting a first week bye, first round bye, and you're playing at home. It sucks, man. It sucks, man. Oregon, bro. I thought this was the year, man. They chose the worst time to have the worst half. Because the second half wasn't as bad, you know. You score before the half, and then you score but then at that point the lead is insurmountable. They lost 41-21. And all the other games were, and while I said that Oregon is the perfect example and not really the other ones, even though you can say the other, Arizona State, you can say that they also suffered from rust. I think that the reason why I'm focusing on Ohio State and Oregon isn't just because I'm an Oregon fan. It's because, to me, those teams were the two teams that a lot of people thought looked eye to eye. They played each other in the regular season in Oregon, and Oregon won by 1 point, both in the Big Ten. Skill-wise, you look, even though I know one's an 8 seed and one was a 1 seed, you looked and you said, those two look at each other eye to eye. You didn't really feel that way with Texas and Arizona State, even though Arizona State made it a great game. Shouts out to Scatapoo. Arizona State, I do think, you don't like saying that one play dictated a game, but I do think that we may be talking about a different team representing themselves in the Final Four if the refs would have called the blatant targeting. And here's the thing. I don't think, obviously you hope that a ref gets it right every time. You're paying that person to get it right. I think the most frustrating thing, it's not the fact that you get it right or wrong. That is what it is. People are human. Mistakes happen. I think it's the inconsistency of how things are called. Because if you look at the game, if you look at the Arizona State game before Texas, one of their players was hit with a targeting penalty, which caused him to miss the first half of the game against Texas. And that same exact play happened in the Texas-Arizona State game. However, this time, it was the Texas player targeting an Arizona State player. Now, you can say he didn't mean to lead with the crown of his head. He didn't mean to make contact. But you cannot say that he didn't hit a defenseless receiver. And Arizona State was driving at that time. If they would, for possibly the game-winning drive, if they would have called that targeting, it would have been like Arizona State 1st and 10 at the Texas 39. Arizona State had all the momentum, but that moment zapped the momentum out of Arizona State. Now, yes, they lost in triple overtime? I think it was like 31-39 or 34-39 or something like that. But going into it, you didn't think that Arizona State was on the same level as Texas. At least a lot of people didn't. And I will say shout out to Arizona State for proving us wrong. You know who didn't prove us wrong, though? Boise State and Penn State. Now, Boise State can hang their head on having an incredible season. This is the inaugural 12 team playoff, and they found themselves as a 3 seed. They have Ashton Genty, who was a Heisman finalist. Going into this game, he had an opportunity of breaking the all-time rushing record in one season from a running back. And they really have nothing to hang their hat on or like to feel down about. You went up against a Penn State team that, in all intents and purposes, should not have been a 6 seed. But Penn State showed Boise State the difference between a complete team and having a great player. Boise State is, at least this year, it was Ashton Genty and didn't have much else. And Penn State showed that. And again, shouts out to Notre Dame. When you're playing against a team that you may think you're better than, when you're playing against a team that, at least record-wise, you may be eye to eye with, you cannot make mistakes. Because mistakes get magnified, especially when you don't have your entire arsenal. When you're out your starting quarterback, that leaves a lot less room. So when you have two fumbles, and you have a player on the sideline making contact with a ref, it just gets magnified. Look, I'm not going to say that the top 4 teams in the country are still playing. I think if you did some shuffling, did some reseeding, I think the top 4 teams in the country, 2 of them are gone. But that is a testament to, and shouts out to Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State. They were able to win, and now we will see the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. I will say this, though. Obviously, the inconsistency. Well, it's always an up and down thing with Will Howard, the quarterback of Ohio State. But that Ohio State that we saw play Tennessee, and the Ohio State, at least in the first half, that we saw against Oregon. If Ohio State plays to the best of their ability, there's not a team on this planet in college football that can beat that team. But shouts out to them, man. I'm excited to see, because I think Notre Dame and Penn State are kind of eye to eye. Like they're I don't really see much difference between them. They have different styles, sort of. But I'm interested to see that game in Texas. Texas hasn't played its best all playoffs. Maybe they'll get it done. Their defense might get it done with Ohio State. I don't know. But shouts out to Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State for making it past the round. So, speaking of making it past the round, let's switch over to basketball for a second. We have to have a serious conversation about Jimmy Butler. Because I'm not here questioning how good of a player Jimmy Butler is. I'm not here questioning the value that Jimmy Butler brings to a team. Hell, Jimmy Butler led the Miami Heat to 2 NBA finals. While obviously they didn't win, he at least led them to 2 NBA finals. But there's a pattern with Jimmy Butler. And I think something has to be said when every single place Jimmy Butler goes to ends messy. Whether you talk about Chicago, whether you talk about Minnesota, every place Jimmy Butler goes, Philly, ends messy. Not saying it's all his fault, but what I'm saying is we have to talk about the value of Jimmy Butler. Because your value, your importance allows people to deal with a lot. When you have a high value to something, a lot of people are able to turn a blind eye. People are able to excuse certain things when your value is so high to the organization and to the job or to whatever is being discussed. And Jimmy Butler's value to the Miami Heat has been exponential. He's been their best player. But that we haven't seen that Jimmy Butler, at least in the last, I'll say, 2 years. And it's no coincidence that now we're seeing a bunch of and hearing a bunch of back and forth between the Miami Heat organization and Jimmy Butler, just like we heard a bunch of back and forth between the 76ers and Jimmy Butler and the Minnesota Timberwolves and Jimmy Butler and the Chicago Bulls and Jimmy Butler. When Jimmy Butler is playing at the best of his ability, when he's healthy, he is a tremendous player. It's always difficult to talk about Jimmy Butler and to really show his value because he doesn't really take the regular season, or I'll say it like this. And we've talked about this before, there's a difference between playoff Jimmy Butler and regular season Jimmy Butler. Regular season Jimmy Butler, you're not going to get, they're not eye-popping numbers. You might get one very sporadically, but it's not eye-popping. Playoffs, though, that's how you get Jimmy Butler leading the Bulls to two NBA Finals. But today, Jimmy Butler today, I don't know if his value is worth, I'm not going to call it a headache. I'm going to call it if it's worth what he's putting the Heat through. Now, this has been an ongoing thing for the last, this season pretty much. Since the beginning of since the off season to now, this has been a recurring thing. It seems the tension has grew between Jimmy Butler's camp and the Miami Heat. Hell, Shams Charania was in it, and Jimmy Butler, he reported that Jimmy Butler wants out, and there were his agent, and Jimmy was like, no, that's not true. Even though now Jimmy Butler has officially requested a trade out of Miami. The issue that I see with Jimmy Butler is I don't know if I don't think Jimmy Butler is good enough to be a quality number one player. Right now, you could talk about his age, you can talk about his durability. I don't think at this moment he is good enough to be a number one player on a team. And you think that team has championship aspirations. He was that for the Miami Heat, but again, he's getting older and the game is getting faster, and injuries have started to pile up. And now he's, quote unquote, fallen out of love with the game. The other issue I see is that contract that he has. You see, it's always interesting when you get to times like this. When you sign the contract that you signed, people praise it. It's very rare that you get a lot of people like, why would you give, Jimmy Butler just came off, since 2020, he's been to 2 NBA finals, and he's been to, I think, 3 conference finals. Maybe 4 conference finals. But I know he's been to 2 NBA finals for sure. He lost to the 2020 Lakers in the bubble, and he lost to the Nuggets, 2 years ago. When you give Jimmy Butler that contract, you hope that, he plays to the value of that contract. But again, because of age, because of injury, we have not seen that. And now that's a tough contract to move. Because just like I'm saying it, just like Miami Heat know, the rest of the NBA knows how much Jimmy Butler cost and how much he cost emotionally. Jimmy Butler he's not, I don't think he's the type of person that can just go with the flow. I also don't think Jimmy Butler is the type of person that can just fit into a system. He's been a number 1 player for majority of his career, or number 1 option. I don't know if you can just fit him into a system. Like, for instance, before the season started, we heard Jimmy Butler, one team that we kept hearing Jimmy Butler could go to was the Golden State Warriors. And while that sounds intriguing, and it sounds good, I mean, Jimmy Butler clearly would not be a number 1 option. And you pair him and his personality alongside someone like Steph Curry, who's more laid back, but is still a killer on the floor. And Draymond Green, who's more like a Jimmy Butler, just louder with it. And you can put him at the 2 spot. I mean, you can put him at the 3 spot. Who knows? That sounds intriguing, but then you realize you have to give up Andrew Wiggins. You have to give up Kuminga. You have to give up Brandon Podziemski. You have to give up a bunch of stuff because of that contract. And Jimmy Butler, I don't think is worth that. So you're I don't know what team you're going to where you have a legitimate chance to compete for a championship. I don't think Jimmy Butler is bad. I don't think he's a bad player. I just think that when you have 1 or 2 things happen, it could be a coincidence. When it continues to happen, at that point, that's just the norm. That's just who you are. And Jimmy Butler has had the reputation, especially when things aren't going his way, especially when things don't look the way that he wants it to look. He has a reputation of being a difficult player. And this is yet another situation where he is being difficult with the team. And I'm not saying that Jimmy Butler is going to be out the league soon. Don't hear me say that. But I don't know how many times this can continue to happen when your production, when your value continues to go down due to age, due to injuries. Because mind you, Jimmy Butler, he's not the same defender that he used to be because of injuries and age. He's not the offensive weapon. He's never been the greatest offensive weapon. And honestly, he's never been the greatest leader. So I don't know, especially with the contract that's attached to him, I don't know how much, I don't know. But I do think that his time, especially in Miami, with Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, that's not the organization that you want to. First of all, that's not the organization that you hear too much instability with. I mean, you see Udonis Haslem was there as long as he was. You don't hear about too much dysfunction with the Miami Heat. So I expect this to get nipped in the bud quick, whether that's Jimmy Butler changes tune or Miami comes out and says, even though they did come out and say we're not trading him, maybe they just dead all this. I don't know. But I do know that this is not the Miami Heat is most definitely not the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're not the Philadelphia 76ers. They're not the Chicago Bulls. They're not about to play this. Pat Riley ain't about to. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think that we have seen the end of Jimmy Butler in Miami. But I don't know. That's also the issue that the NBA runs into a lot as far as giving these stars as much power as they do. Because once they are unhappy and once they request a trade, you kind of have to acquiesce to them. So I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know. I mean, if we just talk about player, Jimmy Butler could fit on the Golden State Warriors. I just think that they'd have to give up too much to get him. Maybe the Phoenix Suns, they definitely need an injection of defense. But again, are you willing to give up Bradley Beal? Because that seems like the one contract that seems to match Jimmy Butler's. I don't know. I'm very interested to see if the Phoenix Suns get Jimmy Butler. That would be interesting because he would not go from the one option in Miami to the third option. He's definitely not over KD and he's definitely not over Devin Booker. So I don't know, but I do think that we at least now. I'm not saying we've seen the last, but Jimmy Butler's time in Miami seems to be coming to an end very soon, but we'll see. Oh man, let's move forward and let's talk about another tenured that should be coming to an end very soon, and that is the Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams now tenured in New York. This is the part of the episode where I'm going to toot my own horn just a tad bit. This is the part of the episode where I'm going to say, I told you so, just a little bit. Because I, in fact, told you so. What did I tell you? I said, there's not a team in the NFL, not the Chiefs, not the Ravens, not the Bills, not the Eagles. There is not a team in the NFL going into the season that had more pressure on their shoulders than the New York Jets. Not a one. And I also said that if you do not see, or if the Jets don't feel like the expectations that they put on themselves and the expectations that is bred when you bring someone like an Aaron Rodgers, if those expectations are not met, we will see drastic changes. And as we sit here today, with the regular season being over after Sunday, what have we seen? Robert Saleh gets fired. Nathaniel Hackett gets demoted. You trade for Davante Adams probably more than you wanted to. We've seen disagreements between Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Now, we're hearing reports that if Aaron Rodgers returns next year, Garrett Wilson wants out. When expectations don't breed the results that you expect them to, this is what you get. There is a lot wrong with this entire Jets situation. From the ownership, I'll say it like this. The biggest issue with Aaron Rodgers being a Jet is this. And I said this, again, this is me tooting my own horn. When you have the accolades, when you have the history that you have with the Green Bay Packers, people, they're not seeing reality. They're not seeing a 41-year-old quarterback. They're seeing the quarterback that used to break records and has 4 MVPs, that has a Super Bowl in Green Bay. They're expecting you, to bring the greatness that you found and had in Green Bay. They expect you to put that on your back and bring it to the Jets. They're blind to how it ended in Green Bay the last maybe 2 years. And the injury gave you another year. Another year of expectation, another year, especially when they had to sit through what they sat through with Zach Wilson, which in craziness, like when it's crazy to think about, that was a better tenured. Zach Wilson's tenured with the Jets has been a better tenured than Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. Not because Zach Wilson is better. Not because Zach Wilson had more wins, not because Zach Wilson had better numbers, but because the expectation with Zach Wilson was much different than the expectation with Aaron Rodgers. Again, when expectations are not met, finger pointing gets a lot louder. Because nobody wants to be the reason why you do not meet expectations. What were the expectations that that the New York Jets had going to the season? Super Bowl or bust. When you have one of the most expensive payrolls in football, when you completely revamp your offensive line, when you bring in talent like Alan Lazard and Devontae Adams halfway through the season. You still have Breece Hall. You still have Sauce Gardner. You still have Quentin Williams. You still have C.J. Mosley. Like, you still have Garrett Wilson. I just talked about Jimmy Butler. And I said that your value and your talent allows you to turn a blind eye to other things that may not be as appetizing as what you want it to be. When Aaron Rodgers is breaking records, when Aaron Rodgers is getting MVPs, when Aaron Rodgers is leading your team to the playoffs year after year and building a resume that allows you to say he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, at least skill-wise. Some of the personality traits that Aaron Rodgers exudes is able to be pushed aside because he's just that talented. Well, when Aaron Rodgers isn't playing well or to the level of which you want him to, maybe not showing up for OTAs and mandatory, mini camp or training camp, not showing up for that. Now it might be a lot harder to overlook, or some of the comments that he does weekly about the team. It's a little harder to overlook because your production is not what we want it to be. This season, Aaron Rodgers, at least before Sunday, if he plays, he's thrown for 3,623 yards, which is 12th in the NFL. He's thrown 24 touchdowns, which is 11th, and he's tied for 84th with 10 interceptions, with a QBR of 48.3, which is 25th in the league. Outside of the QBR, those aren't terrible numbers. Those aren't numbers that would ensure somebody to not be there next season. I mean, top 15 in yards, top 15 in touchdowns isn't bad. But tack on the expectations of a Super Bowl. Tack on some of the comments and some of the actions that you've had this offseason, which could directly point to why this season has not been great. Then those numbers start to get a little shaky. Like, hold on. You're putting up those numbers and you're 41 and the team only has 4 wins. The issue that Aaron Rodgers ran into, and I think more than just Aaron Rodgers, the issues that the Jets organization ran into is the Jets have been dysfunctional for damn near the majority of their existence. And you put your faith in a guy, and understandably so, you put your faith in an extremely talented individual. You put the current and future of the organization in a very talented quarterback's hands. But that talent that you thought he was coming with isn't the talent that we've seen in recent memory. And on top of that, you put your faith in a quarterback that hasn't shown. Aaron Rodgers' job was to put a dysfunctional team on his back and ride them to, and the team was supposed to ride him to glory. And Aaron Rodgers is not that. In fact, I think what they realize is Aaron Rodgers is just as dysfunctional as a person as the Jets organization. It's just he was hella talented. And now that talent is not superseding the dysfunction. I think this is one of the biggest failures in NFL history. A free agent signing, just one of them, because it wasn't just Aaron Rodgers. They built their team around Aaron Rodgers. You went and got Devontae Adams, a wide receiver that he saw most of his success with, and it still did not work. You completely revamped the offensive line that has been absolutely terrible. You fire a coach that is defensive minded, and it's no coincidence that the defense took a nosedive after that. In fact, you fire a coach that was one game out of first place in the NFC at the time. I mean, AFC, I'm sorry. No, I'm not first place. He was first place from the AFC East. It's now reports are saying that Aaron Rodgers is not and Devontae Adams is gone next year. I think there's three places Devontae Adams should go if he wants to compete, because this is the third season he's had a losing record since leaving Green Bay. There's only there's four teams that he can go to that I think if he wants to have a chance at anything. That is the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Washington Commanders. I still think that there is talent in Devontae Adams. I still think that I'm not going to say he's one of the top wide receivers in the league anymore, especially when you see what Jamar Chase is doing, when you see what Justin Jefferson's doing. No, I don't think Devontae Adams is on that level anymore, but I think Devontae Adams is still good enough to be a number one or an incredible number two receiver. And you pair him alongside someone like Zay Flowers. You pair him alongside someone like DeAndre Hopkins. This version of DeAndre Hopkins. You pair him along someone of Amari Cooper or Terry McLaurin. That'd be crazy. But in all intents and purposes, this was a colossal failure of a season for the Jets. And I'm not excusing and I'm not discrediting anything that Aaron Rodgers has done in his career. As far as I still think that Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen. I still think he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I think as a talent perspective, it doesn't get much. You can't build a list of the most talented quarterbacks we've ever seen and not have Aaron Rodgers near or at the top. But the way that Green Bay ended and the way that this tenured in New York not only has gone but is ending, it's hard for me to not say that this is a career-changing situation, because who is going to want Aaron Rodgers after this? Aaron Rodgers has, I think that this, I don't know, because just like we were talking about with Jimmy Butler, a lot of times your talent supersedes anything else that goes on. Well, Aaron Rodgers hasn't been great all year. So who's going to want to put up with all that Aaron Rodgers comes with if this is what it comes with? Like if you get Netflix specials, it's Pat McAfee interviews where he's still talking about the vaccine and going back and forth with Ryan Clark, seemingly or passively throwing players under the bus or teammates under the bus, never really taking accountability for him not playing well. Who's going to want to deal with that from a 41-year-old quarterback? No. I think we've seen the end of Aaron Rodgers. Because when you look at the landscape of the league, he ain't Joe Flacco right now. So shockingly, outside of interceptions, I think Joe Flacco right now is better than Aaron Rodgers is right now. I don't know what team, when you look at the landscape of the league, I don't know what team wants to take a flyer, he's a bridge quarterback at this point. He would be a quarterback to play until they get they're the person that they really want. And I don't know what team. No, not the Jaguars. Maybe Titans. Depending on who they get in the draft. Maybe the Titans, but I don't know. Maybe the Browns, but it depends on who they get in the draft. But I know Deshaun Watson's coming back, so I don't know. I think we've seen the end of Aaron Rodgers, honestly. I could be wrong, but what has he done to make you think that they should take a flyer on him in the last 2 years? Nothing. Last 4 years. I don't know. Devonta Adams, yeah. Aaron Rodgers, I think that we've seen if he plays Sunday, we will have seen the last of Aaron Rodgers, possibly in the NFL. And it's crazy how a player as talented as he is, scratch that, as talented as he was, as prolific as he was, as influential to the game of the NFL, of the game of football, how his career ends the way that it ends. If this is the end. And it surely feels like the end. I don't think there's ever been a great quarterback to the in the echelon that Aaron Rodgers put himself in. I don't think it's ever ended as poorly as it has with this Aaron Rodgers and Jets situation. At least at the quarterback position, which is crazy. So we'll see. Speaking of we'll see, bro, and let's move forward. First, let me say yes. I understand that I'm a Commanders fan, so a lot of things that I'm about to say, people are just gonna chalk up to, oh, he's a hurt or he's a Commanders fan, so can't take anything he says seriously. Cool. This has nothing to do with my fandom of the Commanders. This has everything to do with my fandom and my love for history, in a sense of, when you have a chance to make history in the best, in a great way, you go for it. Saquon Barkley is about 100, close to like 150, I believe, or 100 and something yards away from breaking the NFL single season rushing record that was held by Eric Dickerson for so many years. He's about 150, I think, yards away from doing that. And you're going up against one of the worst rushing defenses and one of the worst teams in football in the Giants. The team that gave up on Saquon Barkley. And the Eagles are going to sit Saquon Barkley. From what reports, the Eagles are going to sit Saquon Barkley, pretty much ensuring that he doesn't break the record. I get it. I know, team over me. They want their players to be healthy for a healthy playoff run. But here's my thing. Do you know how many times we've seen players rest? And I don't, knock on wood, I don't wish this on anybody. I don't wish this on Saquon. I don't wish this on anyone. Do you know how many times we've seen a player sit and that player gets hurt the next game? I don't wish that, but what I'm saying is, you never know, especially in the game of football. You never know, so you can't bank on, oh, he'll be all right. No, I understand that the Eagles are in a position that could find themselves in the Super Bowl. And you want your full team and you don't want to risk. I get it. But that doesn't. But who says that they're going to get hurt if Saquon Barkley breaks his record? Who says that they can't break this record, then you bench them, and then they go on? Like, I look at it like this, man. When we talk about before LeBron James broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record. When we talked about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, did we talk about how many championships he had? Did we talk about how many Defensive Player of the Years he had? Did we talk about anything other than him being the all-time leading scorer in basketball? No. When you have a chance to etch your name in the history of your sport, you go for it, man. I would love to see Saquon Barkley break this. As a Commanders fan, I would love to see Saquon Barkley break this record. Again, and this is the same thing, and that's why I was so hurt, man, when, what, was it last year when Tyreek Hill got hurt? Because he was on pace to have over 2,000 receiving yards in a season. It sucks, bro. This sucks. This is the, man. I get it, man. I will say this: the Eagles better win a Super Bowl, because if not, this is going to be the story the whole time. Not only did you not win a Super Bowl, but you had a chance to make history. You had a chance to. This isn't just a rushing record. While yes, Saquon Barkley would be the face of, this is the greatest rushing season that a wide running back has ever had, he would be the face of that. But this is also, you'd want that record to be in your building. He did it as an Eagle. He did it behind this offensive line. It's a collective achievement that you essentially are saying, nah, we're good. Yeah, he's just the ninth player to rush over 2,000 yards. We're good with that. If that ain't the worst, man. I would have loved to see Saquon Barkley break that record, man. I think it's trash that they're not allowing him to. So, but they better win a Super Bowl. I will say that, because that's nasty work, bro. I know Saquon Barkley, the team player, I'm fine with it. No, bro. I'm just like Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco. I'm pulling up with my helmet and pads. I'm playing, bro. I'm getting, especially against the Giants. Oh, yeah, I'm getting that. So, yeah. But this is the last week of the NFL season. There's a lot of playoff implications going on. I'm going to give my predictions because, why not? You have the games today, actually. You have Cleveland at Baltimore. Baltimore needs this game to win the AFC North, and you're going up against a Cleveland team that hasn't scored, I think, over 10 points in the last 3 weeks. And they're starting Bailey Zappi, which is the third-string quarterback, and you're playing this in Baltimore. It would be crazy for me to think that Baltimore loses this game. If Baltimore loses this game, that would be the worst-case scenario that would be the worst loss. Right now, I think the Raiders is the worst loss on the Ravens season. The Cleveland Browns beating them, this would be the worst loss. So I have the Baltimore Ravens beating the Cleveland Browns. Then you have Cincinnati going into Pittsburgh. Cincinnati needs this win to keep their playoff hopes alive. Pittsburgh needs a win because they need a win. I think they've lost the last 3. You don't want to go into the playoffs losing 4 straight. However, I don't know if the Pittsburgh offense is going to keep. I got Cincinnati. I think Pittsburgh. The stuff that I'm hearing out of Pittsburgh, that we've heard out of Pittsburgh over this last week, hasn't been the best. Yeah. I think Cincinnati they're hungrier. They need this win. Obviously, they need more help, but they need to start with the win. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. Joe Burrow. Yeah. Some of these games don't even matter, but let's go through them. Carolina at Atlanta. I think Atlanta's better than Carolina, even though Carolina has been better these last few weeks. I'm going to go with Atlanta. Washington at Dallas. Washington. Chicago at Green Bay. Green Bay. Houston at Tennessee. Houston. Jacksonville at Indianapolis. I can't even. Indianapolis. Buffalo at New England. I'm going to go Buffalo because I think they're going to play Josh Allen, because I still think, even though I think Josh Allen is going to win because of narratives and everything, and he had a good season, I think that the MVP is still on the line. This last week is going to determine it. So I think Josh Allen is going to play, even though they've locked up the 2 seed. New York at Philly. I'll probably say Philly, even though Philly's not playing all their players. And, well, I don't know, because New York, they turned into 0-3 Patriots last week with Drew Lock. You know what, I'm gonna go with the Giants. New Orleans at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay pretty much needs this win for good seeding. I'm gonna go with Tampa Bay. Kansas City at Denver. Kansas City is not playing much of any of their starters, so I'm gonna go with Denver. Los Angeles at Vegas. The Chargers. Vegas sucks. Seattle at Los Angeles. Los Angeles, they both need this. This is a big game for both of them. I'm going to go with Los Angeles. Miami I got Miami. Miami needs to win for any hope to be in the playoffs, and you're going against the Jets. 49ers at Arizona. I'm going to go Arizona. The biggest game of the week. Sunday Night Football, Minnesota at Detroit. I know a lot of people put a lot of stock and was upset with Dan Campbell for starting all his starters last week for a meaningless game, which I understand. That was also the second week in a row where their defense was horrible, because all the injuries are starting to pile up. And I think that's going to be at the benefit of Minnesota. I think Minnesota is going to win this game. Minnesota is playing their best football right now, and the winner of this is the number 1 seed in the NFC. I'm going to go with Minnesota. I think Minnesota's healthier, and that Detroit, offensively, we know how great they are with Ben Johnson but their defense can't stop a nosebleed right now. So I'm going to go with Minnesota. Those are my predictions. Speaking of predictions, the Pro Bowler was announced, and there are some names, like, obviously we know what the Pro Bowl is. The Pro Bowl is pretty much like All-Star Weekend or All-Star Game for the NFL and the NBA. To be a Pro Bowler, it's an extreme honor, and while the players don't care about it as much, it does hold a lot of accolades when we talk about Hall of Fame stuff and everything. And there are some names that were announced with the Pro Bowl that's not surprising at all, like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. They're both in an MVP conversation. Derrick Henry. I was shocked about. I was told. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. I was told that the Baltimore Ravens was trash, right? their defense was trash. Yet they have what, 3 defensive players? Whatever. I think the biggest headline about if you want to go see the full list, it's online. I think the biggest conversation around the Pro Bowl was who got snubbed, and the biggest name was Patrick Mahomes. The quarterback for the AFC roster is Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. Now, if you want to talk about team accolades, I understand. I'm shocked that Patrick Mahomes didn't make it. If we're talking about team accolades, he has the best record in the NFL, But if we're just talking about individual stats, yes, Joe Burrow, his team has the most losses out of all the 3 quarterbacks, or 4 quarterbacks that we're talking about. But he leads the league in passing, and he leads the league in, I think, touchdowns, or second in touchdowns. Like, come on now. Josh Allen, he's in the MVP race, probably will win the MVP. Lamar Jackson, he's in the MVP race, could win the MVP. And he's having, statistically, the best season of every quarterback in the league. I would say, shouts out to Jaden Daniels, man. But I would say, if you want someone to talk about getting snubbed, look at, what's his name? Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is having a Pro Bowl season, and he didn't make it. But I get it, I get it. Especially when Travis Kelce was named a Pro Bowler, but a lot of that was because of the fan vote. He got a surge of fans, apparently, because of Taylor Swift and everything. But, yeah, I'm not really upset with everyone or anyone. So, yeah, it's just, if you talk about individual stats, Patrick Mahomes did not, in my opinion, especially when you talk about Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I don't know who you would take out of all those people, but Patrick Mahomes, statistically wise, isn't better than any one of them. So, I get it. Shouts out to Brock Bowers, man. And shouts out to Jaden Daniels. Shouts out to Zay Flowers for being the first Raven wide receiver in franchise history to become a Pro Bowler. Yeah. Lastly, before we go, I want to talk about this because it's important. One thing that NIL has done, this is the unpopular topic of the day, by the way. One thing that NIL has done is it's essentially made college sports as close to professional sports as it could be. When we're talking about paying for players, when we're talking about contracts at this point, that is a professional. You're pretty much a professional league, because now you're talking about contracts and employees. That's what it is. And I think everyone should get paid what they're due, what they're owed. And I am all for NIL. If used properly, if used right, if done right. Well, I think 6 players have come out and sued Leonard Hamilton over unpaid NIL money. I think it's upwards of $1.5 million. I don't know the ins and outs of this lawsuit, so I'm not going to talk about the lawsuit in general. But what I'm going to say is, this is the fear that this is what you run into. These are professionals at this point. And you can't withhold money from them unless they don't do what's in the contract. But I'm just here saying that this ain't gonna be the last time we hear about people getting sued because of lack of payment. We've already seen players sit out because they haven't been paid We've already seen football players forego seasons because they didn't get the deal. They didn't get what they thought they were going to receive. Like, we've seen that already. This is college basketball. This is college sports. And when you introduce NIL, which I am all for, this is the dark side that could happen. And trust me, this will happen a lot more. And there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, link in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate everyone that is subscribed or will subscribe. If you like the content, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. It means so much to me. Also, please, 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 all my DSP listeners, please subscribe to the DSPs, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. Please subscribe. It means so much. No platform is bigger than the other. I appreciate all you guys. If you like the content, again, tell a friend to subscribe. Also, please follow the socials. Follow Instagram, follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily there. If you want reels, if you want stories, if you want to go back and forth, that's probably the quickest way to get to me. Just leave a comment under the video. All it means is we can go back and forth. I don't mind. It just means you're listening to me and you're passionate about whatever we're talking about. Please, please, please follow the socials. Again, Happy New Year. And until next time, much love.